Welcome into this week's episode of the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta here, alongside High School OT's J. Mike Blake. It is October 5th. That is the date of recording here. We just wrapped up week number 7 of the high school football season, and we are already approaching 2 months into the fall, which is hard to imagine. Let's get right into some news that happened around the state of North Carolina this past week. Most noteworthy, and definitely what started a lot of dialogue and conversation across the state, was the news that the government shutdown that is still active here as we sit here on October 5th, it affects one high school in North Carolina, and that is Lejeune High School out in Jacksonville. It is on base. It is a DODEA, which J. Mike can go into a little bit more. But because of that, they are able during this government shutdown to resume class. That's not going to be the educational period is not going to be disrupted at all by this, but extracurricular activities and athletic events, including practices, are not able to go on as planned until the government shutdown is over. First off, that's just relevant because it's taking a high school athletic department out of commission for the time being. But second, Lejeune's cross country team, their boys cross country team, back-to-back NCHSAA state champions. They have a soccer team who has had an incredibly successful fall so far. J. Mike, there was a lot of kind of mixed bag of emotions, I think, when people saw the headline about this. Obviously, it being related to the government shutdown, it gets a lot of people stirred in different directions outside of high school athletics, especially, the Facebook crowd or stuff like that. But what is your takeaway from this news, and what is that true impact that it has on Lejeune athletics?
Yeah, I think so. For people who don't know, and yes, we have other military bases in North Carolina, and some of them have K through 8s or K through 5s, middle schools, but no high schools except for Camp Lejeune. And next year, actually, they're going to make it where if you live off base, but you have a parent that is active military in the Marines there at Camp Lejeune, then you can attend. But for right now, you have to live on base. This has actually happened before in 2013. And that's really the only time that I could find that this has happened, at least since 2000. I wasn't going much further past that. The big impact is we're kind of running out of time in a lot of these sports seasons. And what caught my eye was Northside out of Beaufort County. They were moving up their homecoming from Friday to Tuesday just so Lejeune would get the game in. And they would Northside's like, well, we're going to have to move our actual homecoming festivities to a different Friday. And I thought, wait, how has this not happened before? Like, I've followed high school sports. I've been to Lejeune. I've covered a game there. I actually had to hitch a ride with one of the local riders down there and get in because he knew how to do it. And he's like, it'll take you forever to get checked in. It is a hassle to get on base and cover it, unlike any other school in the state. But the big thing is, the playoffs are starting this month in pretty much everything, and not just pretty much everything. All the regular seasons in October. And in 2013, there was a little bit of alleviation for Lejeune athletics, where some employees who were furloughed were able to go back. And what that did was, you can have your coaches run practices and have games once more. They badly need that right now because there is not even practice allowed. And imagine going a few weeks without practice as a soccer team, football team, and then you pick it back up and you have a game in a few days. That's what they could be looking at if, again, they just need that alleviation that something gets approved where a few employees can go back. I guess the more bitter it is in DC, the worse it is for the Devil Pups because who's to say we're not as lucky now as we were back in 2013. Also, there have been other shutdowns that happen in different months that aren't as threatening to Lejeune. In fact, in 2013, it was kind of good fortune because their best team that year was their football team, and it happened during a bye week that was already scheduled. And then when the furlough employees were allowed to return, Lejeune was back at it and played that Friday, so didn't miss a beat. I think the important thing is, especially for cross country, I think cross country Soccer, it's going to be tough to win the 2A East, but they are undefeated. And of course, for every athlete, you want them to finish the season on their own terms, not something out of their control. But I think the long term thing is this team has won 2 straight cross country championships in 1A. They are the favorite right now to win 2A. It will be a close 2A competition, but they are the favorite. And if they don't get a chance to do this, it really becomes one of the biggest headlines that we've had in years. It's almost like a COVID-like headline where you have these teams back then that were really good. They were getting disqualified, taken out because everyone had to be quarantined. It's a different situation, but it is similar in the case of we have a favorite, a title favorite that might not have to play. Long term, also, okay, Lejeune wants to have this thing where you don't have to live on base to attend school here. This is probably the worst thing that could happen to those hopes, because right now, yes, there's a lot of kids who are military kids who go to Dixon, go to Jacksonville, go to White Oak, and then don't even think about going to Lejeune. It would actually make a lot more sense. You're probably ride with your parents to base where they have to work during the day anyway. But they might, if this thing drags out and it costs any of those athletic teams a chance to have a senior night, a chance to go into the playoffs, and all of a sudden, I think Lejeune athletics just kind of dwindles for the next few years because no one wants to take that risk.
Yeah, certainly something that we're going to continue to monitor. Chris Miller over at the Jacksonville Daily News has also done a great job going around and kind of telling the story of what's going on down at Lejeune. But obviously, as this continues on, so will the pause of athletics over at Lejeune High School out in Onslow County. So that's something to keep tabs on. And obviously, J Mike has the reporting kind of on a more holistic statewide view on high school OT. Some other news that happened last week. J Mike actually put out a story Sunday morning about the history of homeschool programs in the state of North Carolina and how they have had success on a statewide scale. So high school OT for the last, what would you say, 5 years, 5-6 years, has been putting out all state teams, statewide rankings, area code rankings, all that good stuff. Not often are homeschool teams really rattling the statewide scene. You'll get a lot that kind of break into the area code rankings every now and then. You'll obviously have homeschool kids who will make an all-state team here and there. But very rarely, I think up until this year, the Wake County Warriors homeschool baseball program is the only team that has finished a year in the top 25 of the statewide poll or something like that. That all kind of is changing right now. Mm-hmm. New Life Camp, which is in Raleigh, it's probably, I don't know, 5-6 minutes away from Wakefield High School and probably another 10 to 12 minutes away from Millbrook High School and maybe a 15-minute drive from Leesville Road. So it's kind of right in that core area with a bunch of 8A schools up in the northern part of Wake County. But New Life Camp has a volleyball program. Comprised of homeschool students. They're really good. And they have been for well over a year now. They've been very successful for the better part of the last half decade plus. Going back to maybe 2018, they've been very successful in the homeschool scene. But last year, they really started to beat some NCISAA schools and some NCHSAA schools. And that started to stand out a little bit. And you started to look around and say, like, who is this? What are they doing? Well, this year they took it to another level because they have this really strong core group of seniors. And they added 3 juniors to the mix who came over from the Cary Crowns homeschool program, which folded this fall. One of which is the state's leading setter when it comes to assists. The other is a South Carolina commit libero, Grayson Shepard. We saw her a couple years ago with Middle Creek when they won a state title. They have a really good core of players. And so this has kind of been their year. And I need to check their current record since I last saw them on Tuesday or Wednesday, but they were 30-1. They're one of only 3 teams in the state to have taken a set from Marvin Ridge. They are begging anybody who's in the top upper echelon in the top 1% of volleyball teams in the state of North Carolina to play them. they're very confident that they can compete with any team, and that includes Green Level and Cardinal Gibbons and Green Hope and all of them. So they want that competition, and it's been a couple years now that I've wanted to get out there and go see them. But again, it's hard because sometimes you look at it and you're like, it's a homeschool program, and they predominantly play other homeschool programs. Like, of course, they're going to beat them. So, like, do I want to go and watch them 3-0 somebody? But I watched them play Durham Academy last week, and it was very impressive to kind of see that. But J. Mike, how exactly, like, how unprecedented is this? Obviously, this is going to be the highest that a homeschool program ever finishes ranked in our statewide rankings. They're top 5 in the top 10, top 10 in the state right now in our rankings. Probably going to finish somewhere in that 5 to 7 range. What is like? How unique is this?
Well, it is unique, and as you noted in your story, basically 2 homeschool programs had kind of merged, right? So that plays a role. One of the other things that we've been kind of seeing the trend educationally in the last, pretty much since COVID. It's a lot of people homeschool their kids and then continue to do so, and then homeschooling is on the rise. So anything that we is a trend in education, we have to figure out what's the trend going to be for athletics. And I think what it is, there are some athletic teams that are homeschool teams that have picked up a little bit of steam. Nothing crazy. New Life Camp is certainly an outlier of how good they are. But last year, girls basketball 919 rankings, right? The South Wake Sabres won a lot of games, beat some big public schools. They were not, up there with the 8A schools, but they could have finished in the middle of the pack in a lot of those conferences, and they beat the lot of the showdowns that they had. Also last year, Eastern Christian homeschool, the Trailblazers, and kind of the 252 area. We ranked them 15th in the 252 area code for softball, and because they beat some teams and they played a lot of good teams. It kind of shows that things are changing. Now they're changing the most in the metro areas. One thing that I think will be unique to see is the bill that's out, or that we haven't checked on in a while, but it was going to allow homeschool students to play for their local high school, which is, other states have it. It's the famous Tim Tebow rule in Florida. But when this has been proposed like 2 or 3 other times. Okay. And the one time that I really remember it being proposed, everyone, like even the homeschool teams, were like, no, they didn't want it, because they knew they were kind of building something, and that no one would play homeschool athletics if you could just play for the local school down the street. I don't know how much that's changed, but I think it's interesting to see that homeschool, like that, if that bill did like become law, which I know has got some hurdles to go through, it would kind of cut off this momentum that we're actually seeing, where some homeschool teams are doing something. The other thing to note is interesting, because some of these homeschool teams that we've ranked before no longer exist. Like it's not like a high school or anything else you're used to seeing where there's a brick and mortar building. New Life Camp is one of the few that really does have a brick and mortar building. Where like Wake County Warriors, you mentioned, they only do baseball, and New Life Camp families and Wake County Warrior families, there's some that cross over because of what their kid plays. There was one team that we ranked, the Alamance Acers, that is just volleyball. There's some that are just cross country, and including the fastest boy in the state right now, runs for the Greensboro Gladiators homeschool. So I think it's a little bit of a trend. I think picking up on this right now is interesting, because it's a little bit of a trend, and also it's unlike what we see sometimes with private schools and charter schools. Most public schools are, sure, we'll play you. There's not a look of like, you're taking kids from our schools. They're like, whatever, like you're probably going to homeschool no matter what, we'll play you. So it's interesting to me to see if this is a sign of things to come.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Kind of on the topic, I said New Life Camp is really kind of hoping that the clock is really, time is not in their favor, but they really want to play one of those top teams in the Triangle area. As I mentioned, Green Hope, Cardinal Gibbons, Green Level. I think I told you I was like, my threshold of teams that like I think can compete with them kind of lies around Cleveland in terms of 919 volleyball.
Mhm.
But I also think what's so incredible about where they stand, being one of those top 5 teams in the 919 area code, is that 919 volleyball is in a completely different stratosphere from the rest of the state.
Yeah.
I've told people I don't think there's a larger disparity in the state for one area to a specific sport than the 919 area code to volleyball.
Yeah.
I just the run that they've had, the decade plus run that they've had, winning state titles in what up until this year has been the 4A classification. I mean, the West could send whatever it had, and it didn't matter. I talked about Grayson Shepard on New Life Camp. She was on that Middle Creek team, who's arguably their best player, Sally Perez, 2 years ago, was overseas playing for Team USA on the night of the state championship, and it didn't matter because Middle Creek swept Cox Mill, who had Ryan Hunter, who's on Nebraska, and Jordan Gray, who's going to Louisville.
Right.
Like, you're talking two of the best volleyball programs collegiately in the entire nation in Nebraska and Louisville. They have 2 recruits on the same team on either pin, and it doesn't matter that the other team's best player, arguably, I know they had Avery Scoggins, who was
It was
the Gator
quick.
Player of the Year, but it's because it is efficient.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even close. It speaks to how strong the area is, and it continues. Like, I mean, I mentioned Marvin Ridge. They've dropped sets to 3 teams in North Carolina. Green Level, who swept them, Cardinal Gibbons, who beat them in 5, and New Life Camp. All 3 of those schools are right in the top of our 919 area code rankings. It's just Marvin Ridge is so good at volleyball, but it's like the 919 is their kryptonite, and it's that way for so many programs out west. So, J. Mike, as we look now, as we're 2 months now into the fall season, what are the best area codes for every fall sport?
Yeah.
We've talked. I'm going to go ahead and just throw it out there for boys soccer, because we've talked about this in previous episodes. It has to be the 704, right?
Yeah. This year, absolutely. It's weird because usually in the past, boys soccer is one where the 919 kind of has the edge, especially at the 4A level, where you have a team, except for South Beck's Cinderella run, but there's Myers Park, or Ardrey Kell or Providence, whatever it is. A lot of 704 teams have gotten their hearts broken by, Green Hope and Jordan back in the day. Just a number. It's amazing. You look see the number of different 919 teams that have made it to a state championship game and won. Wake Forest won a championship not that long ago. I think it's 2019 or 2020. Carter Gibbons has won quite a few as well in his last 6-7 year period. But I think this year, though, has changed a little bit. And 7-4 right now has won all these non-conference matchups. They do a good job, the programs in Charlotte, of making sure that they take advantage of any of those. We don't really have showcases in boys soccer, but we do have events. And they made sure that they were going to play, as many events that they could and play teams from other areas. So they've played Ardrey Kell beat New Hanover and Hoggard. They managed to play 2 of the best from Wilmington. Charlotte Catholic has played, and I want to say Providence as well has played some of these schools in the mountains. They played schools in the Triangle. And because they have won all these, you're looking at right now, if I had to say today, who's going to win the 6A title? I'd say Charlotte Catholic. Who's going to win 8A? I would say Myers Park. Who's going to win 7A? I'd say probably Marvin Ridge, but I could also see, somebody else there. If you had to keep asking, going down the line, is East Lincoln not one of the best in 5A? Is Lincoln Charter not one of the best in 2A? Those schools are side by side. And, even on the independent school side, it's almost always a Charlotte area team that's winning those titles. So I think this year, like far and away, that's who I would give it to. I know tradition says it's 919, but the gap was never as big as what you're talking about in volleyball, where it's just always it's always the 919 in volleyball. I think in soccer, the gaps are close. Maybe I'd go 919 second this year, 336 third, but not by much, and then 828 fourth, but not by much. Then 910, which is a little top heavy. It's always Clinton, Jacksonville, and the Wilmington schools. You can always count on Clinton, Jacksonville, and the Wilmington schools in 910. And then 252 is always just First Flight and one other. And it depends on who that one other is.
Yeah, and I would say, like, if I was to put them in order, kind of volleyball wise, you obviously have Green Level in the 919. I'm actually going to go 252 as the second best area in the state for that,
Good choice.
just because you have the three big teams in Pitt County with Conley, Rose, Aiden Grifton, and then you have a team then you have kind of Northeast North Carolina where you have Holmes and Perquimans, and Camden County. You even have like Southern Nash, who's still unbeaten up until this point. West Carteret, who's really competitive as well. Manio in the mix. Like, I think that's really good. And then I'm going to go, it's kind of a toss up between 828 and 704. I really like kind of the depth in the 828. But I think it's pretty close because I think the 704 is so top heavy with Marvin Ridge and Kings Mountain. Then you go 336, which is a mess every week when I'm trying to do area code rankings because they've all beaten one another at some point or another, between like West Forsyth, Northern Guilford, Grimsley, Northwest Guilford, Reagan, McMichael. There's just so many teams at Wesley and Christian. And then I would say the 910 where Hoggard and Grays Creek kind of have a stranglehold there. But you say it's the 704 for boys soccer. That's the best area code in the state of North Carolina when it comes to soccer. I would say it's also the 704 for football. Yeah. When you look at high school OT statewide rankings, 5 of the top 7 teams in the state are all from the 704. 6 of the top 10, I believe, if you throw in Myers Park as well. And then you even have like Mooresville, Crest, Independence, Ashbrook, East Lincoln, South Point. There's so much depth in that part of the state. And obviously, you would think you'd have 1 or 2 state champions come from that area, whether it be a Huff or a West Charlotte or even a Weddington, maybe, depending on, if they play Grimsley, a Providence Day. Hopefully, they're able to pick up a big win in the NCHSAA state championships. So I think that's definitely where it sits for football as well. When you look in terms of like who are the strongest areas in the state, it definitely starts with the 704. I'd say the 919 right after that. Good showings recently this year from Milbert, Cardinal Gibbons, Cleveland, Jordan. 828's been strong, but a little inconsistent. I like the 910, Hoggard 71st, Jack Britt, Terry Sanford, those type teams. Grimsley, obviously the class of the 336, and they've had some good battles. And I mean, Tarboro just rules the roost in 252. But my question for you, J. Mike, as we kind of pick these last couple of sports and what the top team in what the top area code is in each sport, where do you stand for girls tennis? Because I think you could make an argument for the 919, and you could look at programs like Green Level, Panther Creek, Broughton, Green Hope, Millbrook. But you look at the 704, and you have some really dominant programs there, like Myers Park, Charlotte Catholic, both of them still undefeated. Providence Day was undefeated coming into this past week. Where do you kind of sit? Like, is it where does power in girls tennis lie in terms of the best area code?
It's obviously between those two. I would go 919 because of the depth. There are always teams left out of our area code 919 rankings that were like state runners up in 3A or 2A. Again, I'm using the old classifications there. And there's always some team who maybe it's like an Inlow who went on the year, they went like 10-6. And their 6 losses are to 3 of the best 10 teams in the state. They just got swept by them. And, they get into playoffs and they knock off somebody that's pretty good from another area. But the depth is just so good in the 919. I don't know if there's more participation around here, because if you look at the top recruits in the state, there's a ton in the Cary area who don't play high school sports. Yet there's enough left over that put Green Level, Panther Creek, Green Hope on the map every single year. And then Broughton is Broughton. They're always good. Then you have the North Hills Tennis Club. So you're going to have a school like Millbrook or Leesville that's really good. Gibbons is Gibbons. Research Triangle, if you're going for a 2A charter school, they're always a state title threat. So it has to be 919 just because you're looking at it and you're like, wait, Carborough is like 11th in the 919, and they're probably a favorite to win this year the 4A title. 7-4 second. The headliners are great, but once you get down to the lower half of the 919, there's a bit of a drop off, and there's a lot of parity as well, where they all kind of beat up on each other. In this past year, they actually have lost a few of these non-conference showdowns to a few other people outside the area. That has kind of changed the complexion of those rankings a little bit. Third, if I'm just keep going in order here, third, I would actually go. It's tough. I would go 3-3-6, and then 8-8. 3-3-6. 3-3-6 will surprise you. Page and Grimsley are good, but I really like how the small schools can play, whether it's Bishop, McGinnis, Mount Airy, East Wilkes. In the past, they've all kind of been in the same classification, so they kind of beat up on each other, but that's not one to overlook. And then 8-8, because the problem, we'll see if it changes this year, but in the past, Asheville, TC Robertson, they just couldn't get much done in the playoffs because they were there's such a gap there between them and the 704. But smaller schools like Science and Math of Morganton, Hendersonville, pretty good programs. So I put them fourth. 910 would be fifth, just because there's a big gap from Hoggard and Terry Sanford to everyone else, or Hoggard, Terry Sanford, Cape Fear Academy, and New Hanover. So in the past, it's been New Hanover instead of Hoggard in this group of three. And then it drops off really, really quickly. And then 252 is an area that sometimes the number one team and the 252 is not ranked in the final rankings. Here it's hit or miss. Some years it is, like Fike is good, or Arundel Parrott is good, Green Central, but there's really not a team there that you can say they'll be in the state championship finals, which kind of automatically puts you in last.
I'm going to say the last one. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, J. Mike. 704 for girls golf, pound for pound, is probably the best.
Yeah.
But there's no denying the one little hot spot in the 910 being Pinecrest. Right. But outside of that, I mean, I would say 704. Then you look at 910, and then you probably 336 maybe, or 919 after that. But yeah, it's always a very interesting exercise to kind of look at each sport and what the top teams are, what the top area codes are in each of those. And then obviously, we're winding down the stretch here with regular season rankings. So, once playoffs start, rankings kind of stop, and then you get your end of the year ones, and then that's it.
And cross country, it's 919, 704, kind of always battling for it. I think the depth favors the 919, even though you have programs like Cuthbertson in the 704. Then it's 336. Mount Tabor is traditionally good. You'll have but 828 and 910 are really tough because Hoggard and Laney have been really upping their cross country games recently. Occasionally Pinecrest will be really, really good, and then 252 kind of rounding out the cross country. That's boys and girls kind of combined for there. That's how I'd put them in that sport.
Changing topics a little bit here. You mentioned a lot of these teams. We're still kind of looking at them as like what it was in the past. 4A, 3A, 2A. Like, are we a fan of the expanded playoff and what it's bringing? Now that we're starting to look at playoff projections, girls tennis will be our first bracket that we get and we fully take a look at. But where do we stand on this before we dive into it this month? We're gonna have a lot of state championships over the next 2 months. A lot. Scariest thing ever on Halloween is looking at the NCHSAA state championship schedule on top of the last week of football. Another topic. But how do we feel about expanded playoffs? Are we a fan? Are we not a fan? What's kind of the temperature on that?
The kind of template of the meme, the old Norman Rockwell painting where the guy stands up and apparently voicing some unpopular opinion. That's me saying I like the 8 classifications. Like, I know it's so the old heads are like, this is too many. This is everyone gets a trophy, and this is a money grab. Which, never mind that the coaches wanted it, the athletic directors voted for it, the principals voted for it. And if you saw the people at the association, they are dreading a championship. They did not want it. They didn't want the money grab. It's not
You're
even
talking
their
about
idea.
swimming in a pool of dollar bills right now
It's not
over
even their idea.
this.
They didn't
Yeah.
want it. They didn't vote for it. The schools voted for it and said, no, we want to get back to the 8 championship life we used to live in football. We want it in every sport. So here we are. Originally, I thought, yeah, it's going to water down some stuff. And I think Joel Bryant mentioned this. We were talking about the early going of football, where we're like, oh, man, we know who's going to kind of be the top dog in every class, don't we? And the answer is we don't. And that's been a pleasant surprise for me. The other thing is, I think at first I really didn't like that you have 59 teams per classification, except for 8A and certain sports in 1A. You're going to have 59 schools in every class, and then you're going to take 48 of them into the playoffs. I thought that's crazy. That's terrible. What does making the playoffs mean anymore? But now, as the projections, being a HighSchoolOT insider, looking at those projections, like actually it's not that bad. And in part, it will take away the belly aching of I can't believe my barely below 500 team missed the playoffs. How we spent so much time in this state changing every year the playoff format to acquiesce to the last team in, even though the biggest errors with the bracket were the top teams. They weren't seeded correctly. You had 2 great teams in one conference. One would be seeded first overall. The other one might be 12th, 13th, or 14th. Depending on, like in 3A, you had so many 1 seeds, and somebody's 1 seed would be like a 12-11 volleyball team getting a home playoff game and home advantage for the first 2 rounds, except they weren't going to win the first round because of the improv. It was not a balanced bracket. Now it's like, hey, we'll let more teams in and we'll have a balanced bracket. And that's a trade-off that I think works. We are not going to sit here and honestly, if like now the teams you're leaving out of the playoffs will be teams that are like, that's cool. I'll just stay at home. I was 7-14. I'm not complaining. And if they lose in the first round, so be it. I mean, maybe something to build on for some of these schools that never make it that far anyway. They're like, you know what? We got to see a playoff team in the first round. We got to make it to that level next year. The thing is about money that people need to understand. Some schools are going to lose money because they were already losing money on first round games. Now we're not. In some cases, they were losing money on first round games with football, depending on who you played, who you're bringing in, because you have to write that check to the association and write that check to the referees, and then you have to split the remaining part of it with the visiting school. And the visiting school, I mean, you're going to make concessions, but the visiting school is going to get paid in June a little bit for the travel by the state, so they're going to get some money back. So there are a number of ADs that have said in the past, like, look, we hope we make a deep playoff run, but we actually sometimes it works out if we don't host in the first round, we might actually make more money from it in the long run. That's something that I think people need to know, that it's not a money grab. Florida went to 8 classifications and retracted one of them, went down to 7 because they were honest. I can't imagine the North Carolina High School Athletic Association ever talking about it in these terms, but they said, we're not making enough money. There's too many blowouts, and over time, the fan interest declined. So we need to retract one of our classifications, have fewer championships because, financially it's not good for us. Again, the association would never, ever say like, hey, this is bad financially for us. We're going to change
That would set Facebook on fire.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's it would absolutely do that. They will just kind of say, well, this stinks, but it's what the schools asked for. That's much more of the North Carolina way to go about things, rather than being like, hey, this is not enough money for me. I'm going to do it. Despite what the Facebook comments say, that is not how we currently operate. And also, just looking at the brackets, I get excited about the matchups. I get excited about what the second round, third round are going to be. Yes, in the first round, there's going to be some layups for like those teams that don't have buys, but that's okay because I think it's going to take away the most frustrating thing of the last couple decades, which is everyone belly aching about who didn't get in when we know that these teams are about 500.
The loudest voices were always the schools that oh man, like I can't believe I had to tell my team that we're not practicing on Monday. And then you like look at it and they had a barely 500 record or something like that.
Mhm.
I always say, like, I gotta get this off my chest. I gotta hop on a soapbox for a second here, J Mike. My least favorite part about bracketing and playoffs and seeding and all of that are the people who complain about their seeds and where they are, and it's always somebody else's fault that they didn't get the perfect path to the state championship where every round is a layup, and they'll tell you like, oh no 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 no, like we didn't want everything to be easy. No, you did. You wanted everything to be
We
easy.
did.
You want to win a state championship. Like I get it. Like trust me, we've all been on the other side of it where we've seen it, and it's come time for our team to go to the playoffs, and you're like, yeah, I want it easy. Like I don't want to have to run into that team. Like I want somebody else to knock that team out before I have to deal with them. I get it. I 100% get it. I sympathize for that feeling, but like at the end of the day, we are not crowning the team with the easiest path.
Yeah.
A state championship, to be a state champion, you have to be the best team in your classification in the state of North Carolina. So if you feel like you cannot get past every team in your classification and specifically your region in North Carolina, then maybe you aren't the state champion. Just going to put that out there. Yes, we
That
love Cinderella teams. We love teams that catch lightning in a bottle and make a run. Earlier in this episode, you talked about that South Mecklenburg boys soccer team that had, gone on and as a 20-something seed won a state title in 2023. Yeah, that's great. It's not always going to happen like that. And I love that hope springs eternal. And I love that everybody's like, you know what? If the ball bounces this way and we get that team on this round and we match up well against that team in that round, man, like it could all work out. And then we could be there and it could be the regional final. Anything can happen. Yeah, that can 100% happen. But at the end of the day, you got to beat the people that are in front of you.
there's such a
And
difference. There's such a difference in a coach saying, that I hope we don't meet them in a second round. If we do, it'll be tough. Versus like, oh man, like, why do we have to play them in a second round? Typically, like the cure all to this is if you've won a state championship, then like you're saying, the point is to be the best team in your region. And maybe you get a leg up from an upset on the other side of the bracket. Maybe you know that there is a team that's a difficult matchup for you, but you're not complaining about it. And you and I both have had coaches hit our DMs when the
that
DMs are
was a
going.
second round game. That should have been a fourth round game.
Yes,
Okay,
the
cool.
DMs
Well,
are going crazy, as they say.
guess what? Those
Yep.
teams still played each other. That's what you want. You want two really good teams to play each other in the playoffs with
Yeah.
everything on the line. Uh, what's the difference that it's the second round or the third round or whatever? Like, you want to find out team A versus team B, who's better with all the marbles at stake. All right, cool. There it is. Like, yeah, we don't want to see those elite games in the first couple of rounds, but like, we want to see them.
Yep. And
So if they're there, they're there. Like, who cares when it happens?
yep. I think the more the going getting rid of the one seed structure to the playoffs, where you had split conference champions, except well, they're not really conference champions. They're the best 4A team in this 3A 4A split. They were worse than a 3A team, but we're going to seed them as if they were the best team because somehow or another fairness. And all of a sudden we had this unbalanced bracket, and you would have those things. Now I don't see it. Like you're going to have to okay, let's say second round of the 8A West playoffs. You're going to have one of those games is going to have to be a showdown, like a real true slobber knocker. And it's just you're going to have to deal with it. One of them may be better than the rest, but the whole point is you have to beat the person in front of you. And it's not going to be as bad as it was in the previous years. I think that'll take down a lot. As I'm looking at Joel Bryant's 8A football brackets, I look at it now and I'm like, nah, that makes a lot of sense. That's about how it should go. It'll be
In the past, typically, you would, let's say you were in 4A. what was old 4A. Now it's a 7A, 8A, a little bit of 6A. First round, if you were a good team with a high seed, you would play somebody who was a decent third place team in their conference. That would be your first round opponent. You'd win that, then you'd take on a team that was either a really bad conference champion or a good to above average second place team in a conference. Then by the third and fourth round, you're typically facing a conference champion and a really, really good conference champion. And then in the fifth round, you're facing the next best team in the state. And then in the state champion, you're facing the best team from the West. That's typically how it went. It would incrementally, it would get better. Now you're going to have to play these second place teams in a conference right away. So, yeah, you're going to get some teams in there who have really bad records. And I know that triggers so many people when they're like, I can't believe a team with a losing record made the playoffs. Well, little do you know, that team with the losing record thinks they have a chance.
Yep.
And they belong. And so, you know what? If what it needs to be is equitable and give everybody a chance and say, let the games begin, may the best teams win. All right, here they all are, except for the bottom percentile. Here's everybody. Go do it then. If you're a team that has a losing record but feels like you can make some noise, here's your chance. Go do it. If you're a team that's really good and you want, this challenge and a nice path and to prove that, you are the state champion, here you go. Go do it.
I know one of the reasons why North Carolina high school playoffs are so debated is because people do feel like if you can bellyache enough, you can change it in the future years. This thing has changed. And I know I've covered high school sports a while now, and I need to stop thinking about it like, oh, I haven't covered it that long. No, I've covered it for 18 years. I have seen all sorts of different playoff formats come and go because we responded to complaints, usually complaints from the last teams in. We completely ignored the complaints from the top teams that were in. And honestly, some of them didn't have that many complaints because they're like, well, I made it to a regional final. I won a state championship. I guess it's okay if we keep doing a split conference, one seeds that way. But again, we changed everything for the last teams in. Most states don't do that. Most states say, this is our playoff format. You don't get to say, we're going to do it this way because we think this way is best. And I just hope that there's a little bit of acceptance because in the way I'm thinking of it, yes, right now, 48 teams out of 59 get into the playoffs. It's never going back. Like, I don't see where we're going to be like, you know what? Let's shrink it to 32, even though some people would love that. That would be about, the same percentage that we had previously. I think this is just the way it's going to be. It's going to be like, you know what can we stick with in the future years? We're going to have a big playoff bracket. We are going to not worry about what conference you're in because if you haven't noticed, we have 8 classifications and we can't really worry about who's in what conference. So if you, and I think in future years, the idea is if you like your conference and it's not harming your RPI so much that you're not being seated where you want to be, stay in that conference for 10 years. And because it doesn't matter anymore if you finish first, that you're going to be automatically seated here, or that you're a 7A playing an 8A. It doesn't matter. Go get you can still get a good RPI. And I think we're going to see that in how these teams are being seated in their own brackets. They're going to be seated accordingly. Whereas the past, like sometimes a 6A team was given this great leg, or, like the old 3A teams gives us huge leg up just because they played with another 4A in their conference. They were treated as if they were better than they actually were. Again, I don't think we're going back. I think this is the way. I think it's like who am I to say who belongs to the playoffs or not? Reminder, the independent schools decided a few years back, everyone's going to make the playoffs, all of them. And you're going to choose your own conferences and based on factors that are important to you, like how much you can compete and how much you can expect gate money. But we're just going to put everyone in the playoffs. And that's kind of the trend in a lot of different areas of sports, not just in high school sports. So at the end of the when again, it sounds terrible up here, right? There are a lot of Facebook comments are like, this is the worst. When they see the brackets come out, yes, I'm sure there'll be like, how did a team losing record get in? By and large, you hold this year's brackets up to last year's brackets, the year before, and so on and so on, I think it's going to look a lot better, because that's what I'm seeing right now on these playoff projections. So maybe unpopular opinion. Everyone likes to dunk on them. And I know some people are like, right now, like, how is West Charlotte the 6th seed in the 8A West? Well, there's more games left to play. Okay. Like they got time. Just like someone was upset Millbrook last week was like the 5th seed in the 8A East. They beat Leesville. They're the 2 seed. Like,
Yep.
just hang tight and keep winning, folks.
The
And if it doesn't,
small sample size when you only play 5 or 6 games out of 10. It's a lot easier when it's volleyball or soccer, where you can play 5 or 6 games in a week to 2 weeks, maybe even a 3-week span. There's some volleyball teams that'll go play like 6 matches in an entire week if they go to the right tournament. And then you got a football team who's a month and a half into the season and they're at 6 as well. So it takes a little bit longer for the football projections to balance itself out. And at the end of the day, everybody controls their own destiny. If you wanted a better seed than what you got, then either you should have won a game that you lost, or you should have scheduled a different team opposed to somebody else in a non-conference, or something of that nature. That's just ultimately how it is. Like, if you don't like that you lost in the 4th round of the playoffs because you had to play this team, you know what, you should have beat them, or you should have beat somebody earlier that would have put you on a different trajectory to get to where you want to get to. There's so many different things we could talk about in this, including like, I know this week a couple conference tournaments are about to start. Why? Why are we playing conference tournaments? I mean, that's been a topic that I think dates back almost a decade now at this point, of like, what's the relevancy of a conference tournament? But now that it doesn't really matter, like, I mean, I guess you're getting a trophy and you're getting some gate money, and that's cool. But like, even before this year, like, how often did a team run the table in its conference tournament and like pull off some Cinderella stuff to make the playoffs? Maybe once a year across all 20 something sports, maybe twice it would happen in a year. But now I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, we just all get seeded by RPI. Like, so why are we doing this again? And that is what some conferences are doing.
I got 2 reasons why a conference could still do it. Actually, 3. One, and I think I'll have something later this week about this. I think with all the split conferences that we have, and it's hard I had actually talked to a couple of parents this week who were like, wait, you mean we're not going to see them in the playoffs? I'm like, no, they're in a different classification. But I thought we were all in the same classification. No, you're in the same conference. So there's so many schools that have never been in a split conference before, that are now in a split conference, that are now learning what that means for the first time. One, I think conference bragging rights, maybe not this year, but in the future, they will mean a little bit more, because you will have people going their separate ways. And it's like, you know what? Congratulations on doing good in the 7A playoffs, but we won the conference. Okay, perhaps. That's what I'm thinking. I think but right now, like, or in the past, the chase was like, well, if I finish 2nd in the conference, maybe I could be seated here. And then there's a leapfrog rule, and I need to be 3rd because the 3 seeds are going to be seated here. That part's gone. You're just chasing one trophy now. The conference tournament, the second reason, some conferences do get together and say, you know what, we're going to put together a tournament and pool that money, and that's the money that pays for, check your line item, right? Your trophies or all conference awards, whatever. And the third thing is, here's a little RPI trick. Okay, I'm gonna put you guys on a little bit of game from someone who's done a lot of these projections. If you're a good conference and you play everyone a 3rd time, everyone's RPIs go up. So if you're in a bad conference and everyone plays each other again, your RPIs are going down. It's probably not a good idea to do it. A few years back, I think it was Paul McNeil Jr.'s sophomore year at Richmond, and I saw Richmond take on Pine Forest in some epic games. They played in the playoffs. It was epic. Okay, that year Pine Forest had a really bad RPI considering how good they were. They were an awesome team to watch. The reason why is in their conference they had the bottom. There was 8 teams, so you had to play all 7 of their opponents twice, and then you had a conference tournament, you had to play them again. They're the 1 seed, so they have to play the last team in the conference 3 times. The last team in the conference, who will not be named, 0-25. So on your RPI,
That took a hit every single time.
it says, oh my gosh, you played an 0-25 team 3 times? Every time they played, the RPI dropped every single time. And they didn't have enough non-conference flexibility to schedule enough really good teams to kind of overcome that. So they were seated really low compared to how good they were. However, I do see some of these teams that the RPI really likes, and they went out and handled business in non-conference. If they play a conference tournament, if someone's seated 4th, they're going up to 3rd. If they're seated 10th, they're going up to 9th, just because the way it functions, it doesn't have a game limit, which it shouldn't, or have anything like that. So it's kind of like getting some extra games of quality to bring up those numbers. It doesn't average them out or anything. It's just when you're playing good teams, it can only kind of help you and add points. That's also a difference between that and max preps, where max preps would be like the spiral. If even if you weren't playing because of what your opponents were doing, here it's just like, hey, put another good team on your schedule, you'll get a bump. And sure enough, we've seen that. So that's like the only reasons, but it does feel like, I think it's just something that the whole state will have to sit back and figure out, is this really worth it? I don't know how much money you're getting from these things. It seems like basketball conference tournament is still the only one that really connects with everybody, right? It's the only one that everyone kind of understands. There's a history of this, and it feels exciting. But even then, Evan, I'm not sure playing 3 games in a week is good before you go into the first round of playoffs, in which you will now once again be playing 3 games in a week. So it's interesting. We've seen a few volleyball teams do it. I think if it's not helping your RPI, don't do it. And I think in the past, I've actually seen some leagues where only the top 6 teams get into conference tournament, because the last 2 they know will sink somebody's RPI. So they actually took an extra step to kind of gaming the system. Just some ideas for any ADs out there listening.
Interesting. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the High School OT Press Box. I'm Moesta J. Mike Blake here. We're really getting down the stretch here. If you have not already become a High School OT insider, you can snag up the last couple renditions of High School OT playoff projections. Again, a PSA, plug your stuff into Max Preps, and we can get these projections more efficiently, because that in turn, updates the RPI numbers in the NCHSAA system, and then we can go through and kind of plug and play. But it will also be your first opportunity to take a look at what brackets could look like. And again, the closer and closer and closer we get to that seeding day, the more and more realistic they become, the more you can hone in on who your potential opponents will be in the first couple of rounds. All of that good stuff. You can do that by becoming a High School OT insider. Another exciting week of high school sports coming up. Again, J. Mike will have some stories up on High School OT throughout the week. And at the bottom of this story, if you're listening to this episode through highschoolot.com, you can go to the bottom. You can see some of the related stories about homeschool athletics, about Lejeune High and the pause with the government shutdown, all sorts of things of that nature. But again, we thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the High School OT Press Box.